the topic we're talking about right now is who is the X factor down the stretch to help them get to that 2 seed and hopefully get them at least past the first round of the playoffs. And by the way, if they finish as the 2 seed, there is zero excuse for not winning a first round series.
Round, yeah.
But who is the obviously? I think we take out the big 4, if you want to call it that, right? Because those guys are key parts. So you take out the big 4 of guys 5 through 11. Who is the X factor that makes the difference between them falling on their face like they did last year and actually having a run down the stretch and into the playoffs?
I think it's Okoro, and I wouldn't have said that before. He's the X factor if he can continue to hit shots, stay around in the 30s. I mean, and
he's at 39 right now,
and he's almost at 40. And if you think about it, if you could shoot 40% in the playoffs,
game changer.
Like it's like completely, because now you gotta find minutes for him at all times on the court, because now you can always keep him on one of their better defenders, and now you're not going one of their better offensive players. Can you imagine if you do run into a Knicks? I could put Jalen Brunson and I could put Isaac Okoro and Jalen Brunson, and now Donovan Mitchell and Garland can just think offensively. I think he's the biggest one. And as long as he keeps shooting and is willing to shoot those shots, even if he's missing them, I think he could be like a big, big X factor for him.
So I took this question 2 different ways.
Okay.
And Okoro was one of the 2 answers. I think Okoro is the biggest X factor for the Cavs in terms of finding out exactly what we can and can't do with him for a playoff series. But in terms of trying to get to the 2 seed and making sure you solidify yourself in the 2 seed, I think the biggest X factor for the Cavs would be Max Strus. Now, Strus has struggled to shoot this year at the rate he had in Miami. He's at 33% this season, which is fine and serviceable, but that's not the player you just paid $16 million in free agency to bring in as a dead-eye shooter. Now, his 33% and Isaac Okoro's 39% are different percentages, not just based on the numbers, but they're running actions for Strus. Okoro's threes are most of the time wide open in the corner. Strus has guys that don't help off. So the numbers definitely favor Okoro, but the difficulty and the caliber of threes not equal to equal. Or not apples to apples, excuse me. For Strus, though, if you look at the Cavs' best lineups, a lot of them in terms of the plus-minus have Max Strus near the top, or one of the guys that is one of the constants in their best 4 or 5-man lineups in terms of net rating. Defensively, he's underrated as a defender. He's always in the right position. He's not the on-ball defender Isaac Okoro is, but he's a really good help defender, really smart defender. That's kudos to the Miami Heat for developing into that. And offensively, you could run more action for Max Strus than you could for Isaac, just because the nature of their offensive games. He may not be as good of a slasher and rim attacker as Isaac is, but he's certainly a better and more dangerous three-point shooter coming off screens. For them to be able to keep up this offensive pace they're at, they're shooting a ton of threes. And they're scoring about 114, 115 points per game. The last 2 months, the last 20 games, were 18, they're averaging like 122, 123. If you get Max Strus to go from 33% to 37%, which is not a crazy jump to make for a guy, he just got to get hot. You know, you're scoring 125, 130 points a game.
Crazy.
And it's literally the difference in Max Strus making or missing. Instead of going 3 for 8 or 2 for 7, he goes 3 for 7. I know it's minuscule, but it helps the confidence. It makes the defense gravitate even quickly or more quickly towards him in the corner, which opens up more driving space for Darius and Donovan, or dump-offs to Evan and Jarrett. And Max Strus is a guy who I think has been perfectly solid for the Cavs. Perfectly solid.
Earl,
but if he takes one step forward
and
plays like the player they gave $64 million to this offseason, a ceiling raises for the Cavs this season.
Earl, who's your guy?
My guy's Isaac Okoro. I think his confidence is growing. Last game before the first half of the season ended, he took and made a career high in three-point shots. We've seen him become better and better on the offensive side of the ball during the first half of the season. He's the Cavs' best perimeter defender. And one of the things that I love the most is this is a dude that's starting to see the results from putting in the work. We've heard for the last couple of seasons, especially since we've been doing this show, that Isaac Okoro is always the first person in the gym, last person out of the gym. And so to see him finally seeing that payoff of all the hard work, plus the experiences and the failures of last postseason, that's my X factor. Because if he can continue to hit shots, then he's no longer a liability.
You know, in this conversation for the last 5-7 minutes, however long we've been talking about this, you guys, especially Mike, because you talked for a while there.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. have talked about almost every player 5 through 11 on the Cavs. But there's one player that none of you guys mentioned, and he happens to be the best scorer on this team besides the big four.
Caris Levert.
Caris Levert. Now, Caris Levert has an ability to score the basketball that none of the other players 5 through 11 have.
Facts.
Now, he's, as we know, wildly inconsistent in his ability to do it. But his upside scoring is way higher than any of those guys. In fact, at this point, it's higher than Allen and Mobley's. It's probably the third highest on the team.
I'd agree.
His upside from a pure scoring standpoint. He's flawed in other parts of his game. But you sometimes in the playoffs, you need a guy to just go off that you're not expecting. Everybody's expecting Donovan and Darius to score a lot of points in the playoffs.
You need a third guy. You do.
You need a third guy to go off sometimes. And Caris Levert is the most capable. And he was a non-factor, like most of their players, in the playoffs last year. But this year they're deeper. And when Caris gets his opportunity in his whatever minutes he plays, 20, 22, whatever it ends up being, if he can get hot and get going offensively, that could be a difference maker in the playoffs.
And he's an underrated playmaker. You know, some games he can get you 3-4 assists. He's a secondary ball handler. He can create his own shot. A lot of times when you looked at the Cavs last year, they would break down offensively, and when you're not getting easy buckets in transition in the playoffs, everything bogs down. So you need somebody out there that can get to the rack, to create his own shot for himself and other people. And I think he's more comfortable in that role right now too.
And it's funny with Levert. We saw it in the Washington game before the break, but he only played 4 minutes in the second half there. And JB said afterwards, I got 11 guys that can't all play. Some guys are just going to have their minutes kind of be fluctuating. He may play 25 minutes. He may play 4 minutes. Who knows? Levert is the ultimate hot or cold. He got it tonight or he don't.
Right.
And there could be a game, to Bull's point, where Caris comes in the first quarter when they sub Donovan or Darius out and goes for 8 points and 3 assists in a stretch. And next thing you know, you go from a tie ball game when your best player leaves to you're up 14 because the second unit, led by Levert, he could also, on the flip side, go 0 for 6 in that stretch, have 4 turnovers, and next thing you know,
he could play like 29 minutes in a game. He could play 7.
You talk about X factor. He is the biggest variance in that sense. It's a good pick. Great pick.
His ability to score is unique amongst the other guys. So